Today we're going to take a look at early action. Now it can be applied to any Total War and many other real-time strategies, but we're going to focus on Warhammer 2. Now early action is typically defined as applying pressure on an opponent at the start of the battle before the main engagement. Now there are a few effective ways to bring that early action to your opponent, which I'll go over in a minute, but first I should explain why this type of strategy is effective. Now whether you are facing AI or a human opponent, early action has a couple of purposes. The first and most obvious is to deal some early damage to your opponent before they make contact. It makes them weaker. You can target high value and dangerous units at a time where they present the least amount of threat to you. Secondly, it can disrupt battle plans or even tie down portions of the enemy army whilst they try to deal with this threat. Just to see that yourself, you should just go into like a custom battle or just in one of your campaigns and push forward some sort of cavalry on like the flank of your opponent and just see how they deal with it. So yeah, AI deals with it relatively poorly. It can make a mess of their deployment and attack. New players to multiplayer can have this same difficulty. Sometimes stopping their attack altogether, they might just wait it out, they might retreat to woodland. So yeah, against a human opponent it can have this added advantage of hurting their morale, making them feel like they've already started to lose the match. More veteran players won't be as bothered, but nobody likes to take damage without dealing some in return. It's psychological, like when you play chess and someone takes the first pawn or the first piece. So, the first example should be obvious to everyone. Artillery. With their extreme range and good damage, they are by far the best at early action. Just make sure they have a good spot and pick your targets wisely, so don't target flying lords, fast moving cavalry or loose formation units. Try to go for something slow, so it isn't a waste of ammo. But with artillery you can force your opponent to come to you and start shooting as soon as they're in range. Depending on reload speed, you may get up to about 5 volleys, sometimes more, before the main engagement. Next up is skirmish cavalry. Now the point of skirmish cavalry is their mobility. They can close with the enemy quickly, fire some volleys, and then retreat before infantry or melee cavalry can close with them. Through this action you're going to deal damage at a low risk to yourself, and that's why you would bring skirmish cavalry. Now additionally, anyone who has faced these units can also tell you just how incredibly annoying they are, and in their own way can be as effective as artillery, not necessarily in terms of damage, but certainly on the effect it has on a human opponent, being peppered by arrows and bullets by something that you can't hit in return. It is incredibly frustrating. So with this method you just have to be aware of hidden cavalry units, any sort of long range skirmishers or artillery, even spellcasting or abilities from any of the lords or characters that can hurt you. But if you can press this advantage, then do so. Next is vanguard deployment. Now vanguard deployment is great for getting into an engagement as quickly as possible, and it can really catch your opponent off guard, as instead of a distance of 1 to 2 minutes before the engagement will actually happen, they could be facing about 30 seconds or even less before they are attacked. Not to mention that vanguard deployment can be used to position units behind enemy deployment on some maps, increasing your advantage. Now the main problem with vanguard deployment is the typically squishy nature of the units that have access to the ability, so it's something to consider when you want to surprise or take your opponent off guard with this type of early action. Lord or spellcaster abilities. If your lord is equipped with a spell or ability that will do damage, it's an opportunity to start early action, especially if they're mounted on a chariot or flying monster. You'll see some folk as well pushing forward if the lord has access to some form of healing. Why not take some early damage yourself if you're simply just going to heal it up in order to deal some damage against your opponent, perhaps something that he can't heal himself. So yeah, you kind of push them forward at the start of a battle so that they can cast a spell or even jump on a squishy unit. This again is quite popular. You'll see a lord which is typically on like something pretty monstrous like a hippogriff or like a dragon, and then they'll drop on like a unit of peasants or perhaps gore herd and make mincemeat out of that unit and then quickly launch out of the way, getting out of the trouble. Typically that squishy unit will end up crapping its pants as well and running off the battlefield if done correctly. So yeah, this is just another form of skirmish cavalry in this respect. Push them up quickly, do some damage, and then fall back, and of course repeat if you can. And now again, of course, you need to be careful, but it is another useful tool in the early action arsenal. So, there's likely a number of other ways to begin early action that I kind of missed, but these are the most common. I hope you enjoyed the vid. Catch you on the next one.